Hey everyone, today I want to take a quick look at Izotope RX8's Spectral Repair Tool, and specifically how it can be used in both music and sound design, post-production kind of workflows. But specifically, rather than just talk about how it works kind of overall, I think it's a fairly established tool. I think what we're going to take a look at today is really the nitty-gritty of how it works and understanding what all the little different controls do. And so to do that, we're going to start by taking a look at a couple of instrument files. These are some instruments that I recorded and just some little things that we can do to tweak it using the Izotope RX8 Spectral Repair. And actually this works with RX6 and probably 5 as well, but I know they've improved the algorithms a bit over time, so maybe things are better now. So first, I've got this clarinet file here, and it's me playing clarinet, so it's not terribly great. So there's actually some performance issues that I'd want to fix. And also, my room is somewhat acoustically treated, but it is not perfect. But I think it mostly comes across fine here. The next thing we've got is a cello I recorded in an actual studio, so that sounds good. To be fair, the cello actually sounds quite good overall, but I'm going to just show one little thing that you can do if certain notes or resonant frequencies stick out. So what I want us to do, what we're going to start with is we're going to just take a listen to this clarinet file, and then we're going to take a look at an isotope and take it from there. So. Okay, so let's start by taking this and sending it over to Izotope RX8. And what we're going to see is all pretty normal stuff. We've got our fundamental frequency, the overtones. Background noise is fairly low. If I really wanted in RX, I could open up a low cut and just kind of get rid of everything you see under here if I was really concerned. So this frequency around here, if we look down in the bottom right where it says cursor, it'll show you the frequency. So this little room tone here is at 120. So there might even be some hum. So if I want, I could just kind of cut everything below 120. Again, this isn't necessary or could be done at another stage. Such as in the actual mix itself. It doesn't have to be hard baked, but just for fun, let's do that. So next up, the other things that I heard were occasionally my attacks on the clarinet aren't so good. So you can actually kind of see it here. So this is our fundamental frequency, and these are the overtones. And I've got these little frequencies here that stick out from my attack. Again, this is just kind of not great playing on my part. It's the strong tongue of the attack. I don't particularly like that. So that's something I want to take a look at. The next thing is a little bit later. There are these little clicks there. Those are actually quite easy to take care of. So final thing here is this breathy, airy sound from my lips opening a bit while blowing into the instrument. So we can actually take care of that half decently. The problem, the challenge of this area is actually going to be that you can still see some harmonic content from the clarinet itself in there. So we're gonna kind of run the risk of maybe losing some information. And we'll take a look at different options. It's all about how much time you want to spend on this. Theoretically, I could kind of go through and just isolate every little bit in between to reduce the effect. That could take, upwards of 5 or 10 minutes. And for a 2-second part in a much larger context of orchestral context for the piece, it might not be necessary. So we'll come and take a look at that. And then other little things is, you could maybe see ask how much you want these click sounds. That's clearly a key click. That's part of the beauty of live instruments. So does it make sense to get rid of it? Maybe in the silent context here, we could take a look at reducing those. So let's just get started. And the first thing I want to take a look at is this sort of bad attack, or this attack that at least I don't like. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up Spectral Repair, and let's just take a quick look at the knobs and stuff here. So we've got attenuate, replace, pattern, partials, and noise. We're mostly going to be using attenuate here, but replace and pattern can be helpful as well. But for now, we're going to focus on attenuate. So the idea of attenuate is that it's going to reduce the volume of a selected region of whatever you're selecting. So in my case, I can see that these little frequencies here are sticking out more than I would like. All right, and so those are the ones I want to bring down overall. Surrounding region length, you can see when I make a selection, this affects how much the surrounding area is. The strength is how strong the algorithm will be applied. Before and after weighting, you can see there's left and right here, and that just affects how much I'm selecting from the left or right. And then direction of interpolation, vertical or horizontal or both. Now, this might seem like a lot of stuff. If you just go to the help file, like if you click on here for help, it brings you here. You'll see that there's actually decent information that will give you quite a good sense. Oh yeah, I didn't even talk about bands. That's how many frequency bands are being used. So basically, how much information you want to sort of compare with. It's kind of like surrounding region length, but a little bit different. You'll see if I select on a lower frequency, if I'm on vertical, if I select a lower frequency, it's a different relative thing. So if I make that 4096, if I make that 512, it's all kind of relative. So the two actually kind of go hand in hand. And you can see like this bottom one is bigger because of the frequency scaling. So we don't have to worry too much about that, but you can kind of go with just what your eyes see visually for what it's going to compare with. So the way this really works is actually quite simple. It's going to attenuate based on what is around it in those boxes. So if I want to get rid of this, it's going to look at what's in these boxes and say, okay, there's something of similar volume or signal level present here and here. So I don't necessarily want to bring that down too much because it's trying to sort of, it's balancing it in relation to what is around it. However, if I hit horizontal, it's going to say, oh, you know what? The rest of what's around it is actually kind of quieter. So I'm going to bring it down then. And so we're going to keep all these settings the same. I find 512 bands to be a good starting point for most things. So for example, let's say I want to get rid of these two little spots here. Actually, just before we dive into that, let's just talk quickly about the different types of selectors. You've got the time selection, which just selects all frequencies in a given time. You've got the rectangle selection, which is time and frequency. And you've got the frequency selection, which is all of a certain frequency over the entire timeline. I usually find myself working, and of course the command keys are T, R, and F. So T for time, R for rectangle, and F for frequency selection. There's also a lasso, so you can do something like that. And I did my EQ. There's a brush tool, for B for brush tool. So this kind of lets you paint in a little bit, which could be nice. We're going to see that a bit later. And then the wand tool is kind of like in Photoshop, and it just kind of intelligently selects. So this is great for like selecting an entire note region here. You can see it actually selected 3 notes. So, you can kind of, and you just like in Photoshop, you can actually hit Shift to add something like that. So that's great for selecting entire notes. You can see the frequency dropped on that overtone, so it kind of separated the two. So anyways, you can play around with that. And Alt, is it? Alt should remove, yep. And then you can actually select harmonics. So if I just remove that and I go select harmonics, I can choose how many harmonics I want to select, and it does it automatically, which again, it's a nice little feature. And I can select all, and you'll see it kind of ignores some of those higher ones. And then if I want, I can just start to mess around with the sound. So let's not worry too much about that for now. Let's just focus on the rectangle. Generally with RX, what I like to do is I like to focus on lots of small steps rather than large sweeping steps, because it really allows you to make sure that you're only removing what you want to remove. And so what we've got here is, like I said, we want to kind of take a look at some of these things. This might be sort of the fundamental of my tongue, and I don't necessarily want to remove that. But let's start by removing this. And like I said, if I'm in vertical mode, it's going to compare this level relative to these levels. And I don't think if I hit render, you'll see it didn't really do anything, right? It kind of looks the same. So if I redo it and I undo it, it looks the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that now, but I'm going to go horizontal. And if I hit render, you'll see there was a noticeable change. It might be a bit weak. So you could say, you know what, let's boost that strength, and it's going to do it more. And so that's sort of, you always want to be considering how your horizontal and vertical are working, which tool you're using, and to adjust the horizontal and vertical as you see fit. So we can just select all these and hit render. I'm using the key commands. So the default key commands are Shift 6 to bring up the window, and Command 6 on Mac, probably Control 6 on PC to hit render. And it's always going to go with whatever the current settings are. So if I had just done a replace, it would do a replace, but I'm on attenuate, so it's going to do an attenuate. So I can just do that. And if I want, I can even just bring this one down a little bit. And so now let's just listen. And let's listen to the original. So you kind of get a lot of that like initial tongue, the lower frequency, and it's just kind of not quite right or nice. And after all my attenuates, it's a much more transparent sound. And if I want, I can even go through and run those even more. And you know, if I feel like this area might be influencing the sound too much, I can just hit only the after weighting, and I can start to really take out what I don't want. Even get rid of that a bit. So you can really do that to really control little sounds like that. The next thing I said was, there's a little click here. It's a little subtle. So now I can actually, you can tell that I could probably do vertical. Let's reset our things. You can tell that I could probably do vertical or horizontal because it's quiet all around. So for example, relatively quiet all around. So if I just hit render, you'll see that it disappears. And if I switch to horizontal and I hit render, it also kind of disappears. It disappears a bit more because there is a little less around it. You can see I kind of lost some information there, but it's so quiet. I mean, if you look at the color scaling, we're at, you know, minus 100 dB. So this is really quite subtle. And in the context of a full mix, it would not really matter that much. Of course, there are other tools for dealing with clicks, such as the declick tool over here. I'm using, I find the multi-band random works quite well for many things. So I could just select that region. I can make the sensitivity, they default to 3, which is usually quite good. It's a little high frequency heavy, so I could skew it a bit to high frequency, but I keep it low. I'll keep it in the middle because there is some low. And if I just hit render, you see it kind of gets rid of some things, but it's not always perfect either. So if I bring up the sensitivity, it does the trick. But if for whatever reason you really want fine grain control, I do recommend the Spectral Repair Tool, where I can just select that and just go, if anything, for real fine grain control, I can just go like that, like that. And if I was really concerned about that, I'm not, but I can just do something like that. So again, if for some reason these clicks here bothered me, I can just select that and just go, we're not doing declick, we're doing the spectral repair, and it just gets rid of them. Even you can even hear on this, on the end of this note, my lip popping off with the breath. So if I wanted to get rid of that, I can just select that. Now you'll see here, maybe this isn't going to work quite the way I want. Okay, it did end up working. Yeah, that did work, but if for some reason there was too much content, I could also consider vertical here and do it like that. And you'll see it just gets rid of it a lot more. So those are some options. I don't think that's necessary. I think that one's fine. The real trick here is going to be this breath here, right? So again, if I select this entire region and I just go, say vertical, you'll see that there's less on top and there's more signal on the bottom. So if it's completely normal before and after weighting, I might get just a bit too much. It either won't reduce enough or I'm going to reduce too much. So that's something to just consider. So let's just see what happens. I'm going to leave it at strength 1, which is usually a good starting point. Again, I find working smaller, subtler changes and working up to be much more beneficial. So if I just hit render, you'll see not much happened. So let's bring up the strength and see what happens like that. That didn't seem to do what I wanted either. So let's see what happens when we go horizontal. Okay, so now we can see a nice box where everything got removed. It sounds not great, again, because we're losing some of these harmonics that you can kind of see the little lines here. That's not really what we want, but again, you're going to have to kind of balance how much time you want to spend on micromanaging this sound and say doing something like, like that and going render, really making sure that you don't touch the harmonics. And actually, just for the sake of it, if you wanted to, what you can also do, actually, you can also move your region up like that if you want. So, and so you could kind of keep doing that. Let's just do a quick. And you could try and just deal with a few more of the aggressive spots, and maybe, we care a little less about those ones up there. So it's not perfect, but in the context of the mix, it might be fine. But in any event, that's kind of the process you would take to get rid of that. You're going to be balancing how much noise you're removing versus how much core frequency and sound you're removing, and that's always going to be the trade-off in these kinds of things. You can try the myriad of different tools, but the focus of today's video was really on spectral repair. So that's what we've got for the audio files, for this clarinet file. So if I want, I can just send that back, render, and there we go. So the next thing that I want to show is this cello file, and specifically something near the end here. So you can hear that note right there kind of sticks out. So let's just say I want to send just this second part of the file. And you can even see where that note is, right? You can see, like if you just look at the file overall, you can see that this note sticks out a bit compared to the other ones. Now it's okay if the note is naturally a bit louder and it's a dynamic performance. That's a fine and very good thing, but sometimes it's not always what we want. So what we're going to do is we can use Spectral Repair. I'm going to bring up the window again. We can use Spectral Repair to just take that one note that gets just a bit heavy-handed, and we can use some reduction on it. And we can get rid of that little bow change there as well. And we've kind of got this like nasally sound. So if we just take a little bit of thing, there's actually two play buttons on RX8, and there's a regular play button and a frequency selection play button. And your spacebar transport always remembers the last selection you had. So if you were on frequency selection, it'll do that. And if you switch back to normal play, it'll remember that. So I've got to find out what it is. There's a sound that's just kind of not a great sound there. So you can see that a few frequencies are kind of poking out. And so if I wanted, I could select those. I could, even zoom in my where that's not what I wanted to do. Something like that. Yeah, that's fine. Maybe back up a little bit. So sorry. There we go. That's what I wanted. So you can see that a few of these are sticking out a bit. And so if I want, I can select those and just start to reduce them a bit. And you can see that some just get a bit aggravated partway through. And again, this is a case where the bands on either side are going to be really helpful in how much you're reducing because it's relative to what's inside there, right? Because if I did vertical here, and I, let's say I reduced the surrounding length and I made the bands smaller. Oops. If I really wanted to focus in here, and then, so now it's a little hard to see, but my bands are like, kind of like that. If I did a spectral repair like this, it's going to like mute it practically. And that's not what we want at all, right? So I do think horizontal is the right call here. We'll just reset to our sort of defaults, and I can even, reduce the strength a bit, and I can just do these light applications and just really something like that. And I can play around with this if I want, like to really reduce all these higher frequencies. I could do something like that. I'm only going to spend so much time on this, but I think you can kind of get the idea. So, and of course, I could do something like that as well here. That's starting to sound really bad, but you get an idea of how you can use the spectral repair to really isolate problematic frequencies. And this is sort of just a really neat tool to focus small mistakes. So that's mostly what I wanted to show you with that. This is actually really handy if you're often recording lower frequency instruments in small rooms. In my home studio here, I've occasionally recorded an upright bass, and just the sheer physics means that the bass frequencies just don't have enough room to really travel properly, and so they get a bit muddy. And so this is a really great way of controlling lower frequencies in small rooms. And this could also be really good if you're, say, recording your voice or something in a small room and it gets a bit boomy or boxy. Because in the typical mixing workflow, somebody might pull up an EQ and and just try and dial down certain frequencies. Or they might even do a dynamic EQ and say, oh, when those frequencies get activated above a certain threshold, then just dip them down a bit. And those are neat, but it's not as precise as this. And that's what I think is really kind of cool about the RX8 Spectral Repair, is that you can be really precise. My last advice is don't go nuts on it. Oftentimes it's better to just let the instrument sing and do its thing, because if you focus too much on trying to fix something, sometimes you just make it sound unnatural, and it kind of becomes the uncanny valley of audio recording and audio engineering. So I'd definitely try and avoid that. And so if you're happy with it, you can send it back and render it, and there you go. You can even see that the waveform dipped. So there was my frequency that was a bit high, that was a bit loud. And with it fixed, it's a little bit better. Again, everything is relative to the context that you're playing in. So next up, we've got some ambiances, and this is a request from a friend, Proximity Sound, who wanted to know how to deal with sirens in certain ambiances. And this is definitely a tricky one, and you're going to see all the same tools that we talked about in the previous thing applying here. So let's just take a listen to this. So we've got lots of sirens and lots of ambient and sort of a strong wash of air ambience, and the sirens are really in the background. And this is actually going to be quite tricky, because what we want to do is we want to preserve that overall ambience while reducing this fluctuating sound, right? If it's a single frequency, we'll see that it's actually quite easy to fix. But if we're actually this sound is moving a lot and changing a lot, and it's going to be a lot harder to fix. So let's just take a look at what our options are. So we'll send this over to RX. You'll often see a 16K hertz on that comes with some recorders. If it really bothers you, you can just filter that out. So boom, done. Not a big deal. But let's take a look at these sirens, right? So we've got these sirens, and you can see that it's really kind of you can see where the sirens are exactly and how they move. And you've got this general wash of ambience. And so rather than, you can ask, oh, do I want to be going through and like painting all these out? Well, sometimes you might need to. Maybe you don't need to do it for the entire file, but if there's dialogue over a certain scene, over a certain moment, and the siren is detracting from that, you could take something like the brush tool, because it's changing pitch. The frequency is changing over time. Something like the brush tool is better than the rectangle tool or the time or the frequency. So this is where the brush tool can come in real handy. Is there a way, I can't remember if there's a way to control the size of the brush tool. Maybe you just have to do zoom ins. Yeah, you can just do a zoom in on the frequency to. So maybe I zoomed in a bit much there. Yeah, you can, so now you can kind of do something like this. And again, using the same general idea as before, you can start to attenuate these things. Or, like, now because it's on a diagonal, you can see that it might be getting a bit confused as to whether it's the horizontal or the vertical. Like, it's showing you a bit of the horizontal, but it can get a bit messy. So what we're going to do, we can try the vertical and see how it compares by doing that. Let's bring up the strength just to see what we're doing. Right. So that looks like it might be working. Let's just do, you can also use the shift tool here to add in for the problematic frequencies. Whoops. So whatever's sticking out as bright, you can really kind of come in and just select that. And then we could do something like that. And let's just take that. And we can see it kind of ramp up there. And you can just kind of go one at a time, or you can shift them in. Doesn't really matter. This is not going to be perfect. I'm just going to say that now, right? Because again, the frequency is changing so much over time that it's really kind of hard to make it perfect. But let's just take a listen to what we've got right now. We'll go back to the original. So we've reduced it to some extent, and that's not bad. It's not, again, it's not great, but this is kind of the painstaking process if you were to do that globally. Of course, someone decides to start running some machinery while I'm doing this, but it can help. And in a pinch, it does the trick. As always, it depends on how much time you want to spend on these things, right? So let's go back to our original and let's look at another option. I can try selecting, say, this entire region here. And if I pull up the spectral repair, let's try replace. Because with replace, what it's looking for is what's on either side. And we can say we want more on the left, more on the right. And I can say, you know what, let's look a little bit more. And I can also choose number of bands, etc. So if I make that extra wide, let's see what we get like this. That's not very good. See, selection too long, used attenuate algorithm with vertical direction. So that's not good. What they want for replace, they want small parts. So like if you just did something like that, if I go render, you can kind of see that it just takes a little bit of what's on either side. Let's bring that back. This frequency here, it's because it found something there. It's not terribly great. So if I take that, maybe it kind of feels static a bit. It's not really what we want. Patterns, I don't think that's going to help us. Replaces a selection with similar audio content found elsewhere in the file. We could try doing that. Honestly, what I think might be a better fit for this particular case is to just do something like ambience match. And so even if we take this area with our sirens, let's just focus back in on that. And we go learn. Let's just listen. Output ambience only. This is interesting. It's actually kind of incorporated all the frequencies of the siren and made them constant tones, which is kind of neat actually. But hopefully you're able to take a selection of the ambience where there is no siren, and you can just go learn and preview. And so now we can just render that there. So something like that isn't perfect either, but it is pretty good. And it might be better than manually doing every single little thing. Again, all of the options here, partials and noise, finds harmonics and noises on either side of the selection, fills in the selection using interpolation. I'm not sure that that's necessarily what we want either. Again, it's really hard with this shifting frequency, especially such a swoop. So I think in all of these cases, you're balancing a question. It's a question of balancing time and effort versus the quality of the result. Sometimes the easier thing is to just go out and get your own sound and make it better, re-record something. Sometimes the best option is to just look into your own, just find a different ambience. Sometimes it's using ambience match. So you're going to be kind of making compromises at some point, but if you really want, you can spend 30 minutes or more dealing with these ambiances using the attenuate tool. It's just a question of is that worth the time and energy? So let's take a look at a few more examples. And so what I did here was I created a separate, I had an ambience file. With a big drive-by. And then I've also got this siren that approaches and stops. A little drive-by there as well. And then it approaches and stops. So I just merged the two into one file here, just to give a sense if this had been recorded in the wild and this is what you were dealing with. So let's see what we can do with this. So again, we can clearly see what this siren looks like, and this one is a little bit easier than maybe the other one, which had different sirens all going at different times. But again, the process is going to be quite similar, and so you're just gonna have to painstakingly kind of go through and just brush them all out. So we'll just hear a quick before and after. You'll hear a bit of like artifacts or phasing there. If there's other stuff happening on the scene, it might not be too serious. Another option is we could try the wand tool. So if I select something like that, you'll see that that's pretty good at selecting things. But it starts to maybe get a bit messy in these more complex areas. So is that really the best tool? I don't know. See, like that one. But we can try reducing it, and actually let's just try mixing that with harmonics. So you can see we just added a harmonic there. It doesn't look like it did it perfectly, so let's try adding a third just to see. And if I attenuate all those, I do it twice just to... Yeah, so this is a little bit weird, and you'll see actually we may also, I was just applying this globally to a stereo file. You may actually want, if there's any kind of phase difference between the left and right channels, you actually may want to do this individually on each channel to avoid applying the filters, the attenuation unevenly, which might cause some weird phase issues. So this is where it can get really tricky. You know, it's going to be a question of balancing competing needs, but the general tools here are, you know, not bad. It's just about knowing how to kind of balance whether you're doing the horizontal, the vertical, before and after weighting, and just really being aware of, here, I'll just put this back into one. just really being aware of what this selection box means and what you're affecting, right? So if you're affecting more before or after, on top, bottom, and knowing that your change is going to be relative to the signal level in these boxes, then that's really valuable to know, and that the bands can affect how much is in that context as well. So usually with some combination of all of these things, you can get something that works pretty well. At the same time, it's very easy to start doing too much, and it just kind of starts to sound bad. So again, it's all a question of balance. Let's just hear what these sounds are. Not exactly sure what those sounds are, but you know, Spectral Repair is great at just taking little things like that and just getting rid of them without affecting too much of the audio signal. So this is where Spectral Repair really shines, and I think it's just a great tool. This is also really good if you want to isolate bird frequencies, because bird frequencies are usually short and precise, and usually in a range much higher, that they are much more easily, you can isolate them much more easily than with say you know, a lot of human sounds, which are much more in the sort of lower frequencies. So they're in the higher frequencies, and the rest of the ambience tends to be kind of unaffected by removing those specific frequencies. So I hope this has been helpful. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments below, and have a good day. Bye.